This episode is brought to you by Farmers Insurance. When was the last time you reviewed your insurance policy? So it's been a while, huh? Well, no worries. My friends at the Austin Brummett Agency would love to hear from you and provide you with some amazing rates. Give them a call at 678-402-8262 or email them at abrummett@farmersagent.com. That's ABRUMIT at farmersagent.com, and tell them Harley sent you. Insiders, Inside the Bubble with Harli G is now sponsored by BetterHelp. As a partner of this episode, listeners can access the BetterHelp link located in the show notes to receive 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp and get matched with a therapist who will listen and help. Go to BetterHelp, that is BetterHelp.com/Inside the Bubble, the link to get started. You're listening to Inside the Bubble with Harli G, the podcast for the superwoman. Every week, we connect with amazing individuals who share their inspirational experiences and stories while motivating and inspiring purpose. It's time to hang your cape. Grab your coffee, your water, your cocktail, and come on inside the bubble with me, your host, Harli G. Insiders, welcome to Inside the Bubble with Harli G. This is like coming full circle for me because I have together two of my favorites, and then they became favorites not knowing each other, and we just thought, how would this be an amazing idea if we could bring them together? So first we have Cyndi, who was on the very first episode of the pod. Yeah. Woo-woo. First of all, it's almost been a year, so I can't believe that we have come.
Crazy.
Unbelievable. So we have Cyndi here, and then we have Betsy, who came on very early to share her story through breast cancer. Don't call her breast cancer survivor. So two of my faves, and they offline complimented each other, and I was like, well, wouldn't that be great if we just all came together? And here they are, and today we are going to talk about, because these two young ladies have more mature children, okay?
No, older. I mean, one of mine's more mature, but just older.
Yeah. These two old women have grown children. Let's just spell it out.
That's not what I said. Okay?
These grown-ass women have grown-ass children.
Okay, let the record show that that's not what I said.
But the children are more the ass part than the women.
Sometimes.
Okay, see, it's already started. And we just thought it would be an amazing idea to have you two come on and really share. As you know, this podcast focuses on the mother on the go, the high-achieving career woman, and part of that is being a mother and having to take care of everybody and them around us, and that includes our children, of course. And today I really want to focus on what are some things, now that your children are older and out of the house for the most part, what are some lessons that you have learned? What are some of the things that you wish you had done a do-over? Okay, and then what are some things that you're like, I would not change for the world, because they're just absolutely amazing. And in between, talk about those challenges, those failures, those success, those victories. So that's really what I wanted these two young ladies to talk about today.
Okay, stop with that. I turned 50 this year. I am not a young lady.
I turn 53 next weekend.
See?
Is this a competition?
Well, you lose if it is.
She's like, I won. Whatever.
I'm out of here.
Okay.
And I'm happy to be turning 50, but I you know how I'm uncomfortable with the whole breast cancer survivor? I'm also uncomfortable with women who are like, oh, I'm 29 for the 11th year. No, I am owning being almost 50. I'm glad that I've survived this long.
So you see, we're diving right on in. So one of the things that you're obviously saying right now is that I'm not gonna lie about my age. It is what it is.
Never.
And
I lie about my height.
So do I.
Because I shrunk.
Why?
Oh,
Because
I round up because I'm so short.
I used to be 5'11", but over time I've shrunk. So I tell people I'm 5'10", but I'm probably 9.5
Okay.
and a quarter. But my ego won't let me say that.
I'm 5'2.5", but I'm 5'3" on every document that ever existed because
yeah.
I round up.
On document, I'm 5'4", but I'm really 5'3.5".
Round up,
So,
baby.
Yeah, it's just
I don't remember the last time I was 5'3".
Oh.
Like in 6th grade, I was already 5'6".
Bragger.
Yes,
Yeah.
Anyways,
this is not about your height, okay? It's
Oh,
about your age.
This is not what this. I thought.
No,
I
it's
drove
about you.
all the way over here to talk about how tall I am.
No, it's about your age, not your height.
okay. So, ladies, so Cyndi, how old are your children?
My children are 23 and 21.
23 and 21, and Betsy?
My oldest is 22. My youngest turns 21 in June.
Okay, so both of you ladies pretty much had children around the same time or whatever. So I do know, so Cyndi, you made the decision of, which is crazy enough is, you guys will see this, you kind of have similar stories, because I know you guys haven't like talked in detail, or maybe you did behind my back, I don't know. But Cyndi, you decided once you started having children to stay at home, to become a stay-at-home mom. What made you make that decision? And because I have to say, I was always wanting to know what that was like to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was like, oh, that's a great concept. I think I might try it. And then I had the opportunity to do it for like 9 months, and I was like, this is for the birds. I don't like this. This is not for me. So I admire whatever it is that works for you. I admire women that do that, period. If it's for a certain amount of time, if it's forever, if it's I'm not doing it, don't look at me, whatever it is that works for you, I admire you for you to find what works for you and do it. But you opted to stay at home for a while. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I stayed at home. So my kids are 2 years apart, and I stayed at home until my youngest started kindergarten.
Okay, so
And
that
then
was like 5.
So I was home for like 7 years.
7 years. Okay, yes.
I did little, like I worked in the church nursery, and I taught preschool and things that I could do with my kids. But I did not go back to work and then it was part-time. When Zach started kindergarten, I went back to work part-time out of my house. So I could still be there when they came home, technically go into school some with them, whatever. It was what I always wanted to do. Always,
really?
yeah. It never occurred to me that it wasn't what I want. I wasn't sure I'd always be able to do it,
Right.
because you never know financially how things are going to work. But it is what I always wanted to do. My mom stayed home with us. Now, we grew up in a totally different era. I mean, we walked home from school for lunch.
Oh, wow.
Right. And I don't really know, like, I didn't know many kids growing up whose moms worked.
Wow.
Not when I was in elementary school.
Okay.
So, in my head, I think it was just
It was the norm.
the norm. Now,
Yeah.
my mom did go back to work when her kids went back to school. But it was just what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, and I don't mean this to sound like it's not what happens for working moms. I wanted to be the one raising my kids.
Okay.
I wanted to be the one there all the time. And I wanted to be able to be up with them overnight without worrying about having to make it to work the next day. And I wanted to be able to be, I felt like somebody was going to have to be the primary caregiver, and I wanted to be able to just dedicate myself to that, and my husband could dedicate himself to being the primary provider.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, I think if I had wanted to stay at work, Eric would have been like, "Pal, stay home."
So it was like one of y'all was gonna do it.
But I knew in my heart that I would not be happy going to work with him staying home.
Okay. I love it. Okay, and it's triggered another question, but I want Betsy to answer the same question as well.
So I didn't actually opt to stay home. I worked at the very beginning, and then about 9 months, Marin was a little less than 9 months old, and I started having some like mental health, like the anxiety and depression, and I had never really had that problem before, and it was affecting my job, and I was actually, I had, while I was pregnant with Marin, I had started a preschool for a church in Smyrna, and I would drive all the way out there, and I built it up, and then once it was built up, then I worked in one of the classrooms, and it was becoming harder and harder and harder for me, and I just had to quit. And for like the first 2 months, I struggled. I struggled so hard, and then I found one mom, and I started hanging out with her, and I'm like, okay, the clouds are starting to clear a little bit. And then I found Mom's Club.
Yes!
So yeah, I tell people
Saved
all the
my
time
life.
about Mom's Club. Yeah, it did. I would have gone back to work had I not, and I still am friends with those women.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
I go on vacation with them. So when I filmed the first podcast with you,
Yes.
I left here to go to the baby shower of the first of my friends who was having a baby.
Wow.
And that's
So
I was gonna
your friends who was having a grandbaby?
well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
So
she was older, but so I started staying home, and we figured it out, and I stayed home until like doing the work a little here and there, and when my daughter went to kindergarten, I went back to work, and then 2008 hit, and I was working in the automotive industry, and we sold commercial time. And I was the last one hired, so I was the first one let go. So I was a stay-at-home mom again, and then as they got older, then I started subbing in their school, which is a neat trick because it means you get all kinds of perks for your kids. You didn't hear that from me. It won't affect my kids now. They're
Now,
kids.
during so when I thought of, like, when I was kind of, before I had kids and I was throwing around the idea of staying at home, my thing was, I had always imagined myself in the corporate world, but I also had seen myself being at home as well, right? So I was just kind of like, well, which one is it? How is this gonna pan out? And then I started having kids, and I was just like, this is a lot. This is a lot. And like you mentioned, Betsy, I started noticing some mental impact to me being home with my child, and I was just like, it was very overwhelming for me, especially being a first-time parent, and I was just kind of like, I think it's easier to just go to work.
So I found it lonely.
I
found it lonely. My couple of friends, really good friends from college and from high school, didn't live close to me.
Right.
I mean, even you could say they live in Atlanta, but one lived in Stone Mountain and one lived in Roswell, and they didn't live.
I live in Roswell, and it took me an hour to get here.
So they didn't live close to me.
Right.
And I didn't have any friends in the neighborhood
Yes.
that were in the same position that I was in. You know,
Yes.
like the other people I used to hang with before they were at work. I mean, they were friends from work.
Right.
And so I would say that the first year was actually really the first 6 months. I think once my child started having a little bit more of a personality, and it was easier to travel with them a little bit. By travel, I mean get in the car and drive across Atlanta. It got a little bit easier. And then I got pregnant again, which was intentional. I mean, I don't say that like, okay, look, I got pregnant again. I got pregnant again, and while I was pregnant, right after my daughter turned 1, is when I was introduced to the Moms Club. I was sitting, I had met Eric for lunch with Tabitha at Chuck E. Cheese.
Holy moly.
I'm sorry.
No. This was meant to be, because there was a lady there. They were just starting up the West Cobb Moms Club. They were breaking off from like a general Cobb County one. They were just starting up the one in West Cobb, and she was handing out flyers.
Ladies, I know there's so much to do and not enough time in the day. Trust me, I'm right there with you. But what are you doing for yourself? Well, I've recently discovered Body Bar Pilates. Let me tell you a little bit about it. Body Bar Pilates will challenge all of your major muscle groups and provide you with a full body workout. Wow. Listen, I had to check it out. I took a class with Sherelle and it was amazing. They have workouts for all skill levels, whether you're just starting out or you're just looking for a new way to move your body. This is the community for you. Check out my friends at Body Bar Pilates East Cobb or give them a call at 678-941-4371. And don't forget to mention me, Harli G.
And
So yours was specific, because I was Ackworth, West Cobb. But I mean, I was Ackworth, Moms Club, but I was Ackworth on the other side of 41. So the original Ackworth Moms Club was on this side of 41, and then they broke in half because it got too big. And I lived on the other side of 41. So, and that's the one that I belonged to. And like whenever I had stayed home and I finally like looked in, I don't even know how I found them. And they were on a field trip at my Publix, and I went in and just to like get the vibe from them. And I remember the first person I met, and I'm still friends with that woman today.
I think for me, that probably is one of the reasons why I ended up saying, okay, this is too hard, because I felt like I did not end up finding, like the both of you did, a community around me, because even in our neighborhood, there really wasn't anyone that was at the same stage as we were. We were the only one here, my husband and I, meaning we didn't have not a single family in Atlanta. So the closest family to us was in Florida somewhere. And so I was just kind of like doing it all by myself. And then, not to mention the working hours that Stanley and I had. Stanley was a police officer at the time, so he was working third shift, which was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. So that means by the time I get home, I have everything by myself, right? So, and so it was just me, and it became very overwhelming. And then it was like every time I turned around, the man was breathing on me, and I was getting knocked up. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like what is happening right now? And I didn't feel like I had that support system in place, and I didn't want to pull on my friends who were single or who did not have kids. I didn't want to pull on them because I felt like that was going to be too, because I felt like it's already overwhelming for me as the mother. So imagine calling a friend of mine and saying, hey, come watch my 4 kids while I go out and have a good time.
No, my mom's club group, and specifically what became my play group, because we all had kids at the same age. Honestly, we had multiple kids in the same age group, and we became like each other's anchors.
Saving grace.
And, you know, we'd watch each other's kids. You know, I've got this thing I want to go to, or this whatever, you know, I've got an appointment, or I want to go to my older child's deal at school, or and it was unbelievably.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. It like I said, it really was a lifesaver. And it was really convenient being just in West Cobb, because everything was. I mean, we did some things like we would go to like the Center for Puppetry Arts or whatever, but like all the pool days and all the play groups and all the park days, it was all right here.
Right here.
It was so easy.
Direct vicinity. Love it. Now, what are some things that I want to get into? Some things that you felt like, if I could do it again, I would do this totally different. What are some of those things?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about when the kids are young, and talking about with children and not pre-children,
yes.
Other things I would do different before children.
We're talking about after children here.
One of the things I tried to do, I said I worked part-time when the kids went to school, and I tried to be the mom who was in the class, never the room mom, but the mom who would show up in the classroom and help with centers and be there for parties, and still work part-time and still be there for my kids afterwards. And I realized that I couldn't do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped being the mom who went into the school.
Okay.
And it was 100% the right move. And I wish I'd never tried to do that to begin with.
Oh.
Because I found that I didn't spend that much time with my kids when I was in the classroom.
Yeah.
And it took time away from what I could do with them after school. Because I found out I had to work. I had to get my work done when they were home. Because I wasn't getting it done when they were at school.
Exactly.
Right. And so it just, like you, so I guess the advice is you can't do everything. Even if you think you can fit it into the hours, something always has to be given up. And you have to figure out which piece is least important overall to you and your family. And then be at peace with the fact that you're not that person.
Got it.
I feel like that's a good jumping point too. I feel like you and I were very blessed that Pinterest didn't exist when our kids were little.
Yes.
I mean, it didn't come into being until like Marin, my youngest, was in elementary school, which means that we missed all the Pinterest wedding bullshit and the pregnancy pictures and all that pressure for everything to be perfect.
Well,
and this is how you can make it.
Right?
And
I didn't even send out birth announcements.
No.
I was like, you know what? I didn't do it with the first one, and now I don't have to do it with the second.
So I feel like that was a huge blessing. Is it made it much harder to have to keep up with people. Like MySpace was not a place that you.
I didn't do MySpace.
Oh, I loved MySpace.
It was too
so
hard.
much.
It was way too
I didn't even have Facebook till like 7 years ago.
Well, I haven't had Facebook for 3 years, but I had Facebook the whole rest of the time.
Yeah.
But MySpace was better because you could have your own playlist, like music.
Everything. It was like building your own website. Okay.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yes.
But I feel like the not having to compete thing, and you're competing with a false narrative. You're
always.
I feel like Pinterest has just added. I mean, as a mom, I already have so many layers of guilt. Anyway, I already like, oh, I have to do everything. But having Pinterest and social media just makes it that much more unattainable.
Yeah.
What I wish I had done differently is taking better care of myself when they were little. I did not put myself first. I put myself like eighth.
Yes.
And because of that, I ate unhealthily. I just felt horrible. So I was exhausted all the time.
You weren't resting.
So I wasn't able to give my best to anybody, much less myself. So I wish I had taken much better care of me.
Okay. So. I like that. What is some, you just mentioned like you felt guilty about a lot of stuff. What are some of those things that made you felt guilty about?
Oh my God. It's like, okay, well, I'm not
Cindy's
volunteering
like,
enough. I'm not, they're not as cute. My house isn't as clean. I didn't bake this from scratch. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
My kids don't have the cute little matching outfits with the monograms on them. And my yard doesn't look amazing. And I'm not taking enough pictures of them. And my scrapbook is 12 years behind. And I made fish sticks for dinner last night. And I mean,
that's crazy because like I feel like we all struggle with that. And so how the people who are getting their kids' clothes monogram, like, what are you doing with your life? Like, what are you doing with your time? Because I want to know. I really want to know. I always felt guilty about, and I apologize about this when you guys came in. Like, I always felt guilty that my house wasn't spotless.
My house was cleaner then than it is now.
Really?
Oh, no. My house was
was
filthy when they were little.
Well, first of all, our house, it was really a starter home. And then when we got to the point to where it was 4 kids and 2 adults, like something had to give. And so when you first walked in, that was supposed to be the formal dining room, and it became the playroom. So you walked into mess, okay? That was there 24/7. Like no matter how. So the parents that teach their kids to put things back and teach their kids to play with a toy and put it back and using the sink, like I don't get you.
So I was thinking, when Marin became old enough to do like memes were thing and stuff, I sent one to her. It says, "My room is not a mess. It's a museum where I have everything on display all the time." Because my daughter is a hot mess.
So is mine.
I love it.
We'd get on to her. She'd go to clean, and she literally did the sitcom thing where she'd shove it
everything
in
under
any
her bed.
crevice. Under the bed, in a suitcase or a
closet.
backpack that was in her closet, between the wall and the back of the dresser. I mean, if you could find a spot, something got shoved there. So
I found bowls and coffee cups in her drawers and under her sink. So yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Maren. Although I don't know that you're going to listen to grown ass people podcasts, so whatever.
But I love it because I feel like we don't talk about these things. And then, what happens is you end up cleaning like 2 minutes before somebody shows up to your house. And so then it looks somewhat decent. And then the person walks in and they think your house looks like that all the time. And it doesn't. It's like
don't open the closet. It will all fall on you.
So our master's on the main. We still have a small house. And you walk in, our master's right off the entryway. Shut the door. Like, that door was always shut because my bed was rarely even. My bed's still rarely made.
My bed's not made right now.
I know people who wake up and make up.
Oh yeah. Everyone else in my not my immediate family, but my external family, they think I'm like the worst human in the world because I don't make my bed every day. Yeah, my parents don't leave the bedroom in the morning until they make the bed.
Normally, my husband wakes up after me, and he has never been one for making the bed. So So I've gotten into the habit of the bed not being made. So I do make the bed occasionally. Yeah. I prefer it when the bed is made. Mm-hmm. I just do.
I prefer it when the toilets are clean too. But
that's why you hire someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, and I want to talk about that too. But what are some things? So you touched on prioritizing yourself, right? Huge, because yes. I feel like as a mother, that is the last thing that we do. I think as our kids get older and now we're having more conversations about self-care and prioritizing yourself, we're getting into it. Right now, there's still a lot of room for improvement, but one of the things that I always felt guilty about was that whenever it was time for me to do something for myself, I always felt guilty about it because I was just like, well, somebody always needs something, right? And it's like, well, I need to be spending the money on them versus spending the money on me.
So from a money point, yes. From a time point, I think that's where it's important from the very beginning to have your husband, their father, whether you're married or not, that their father be a big part of the child raising. Mm-hmm. And this, I owe this to my mother. When I was first leaving Tabitha for, a while with Eric, and I'd just be going shopping or doing whatever, and she'd be like, and he would ask me, like, what am I going to feed her? What time is it? She's like, let him figure it out. Let him figure it out. Because he's going to do things different than the way you do it. And you have to let that happen. You can't micromanage it. Yes. Or you're always going to be responsible for it.
Yes.
And if you want to be able to just leave and have him feel comfortable,
right.
You know the children are going to survive.
Exactly.
They're going to be fed. They're going to have fun. You have to not dictate it. Right. So that means when he'd be like, well, what should I serve him for lunch? I'd be like, open the fridge and see what you can find.
Listen,
And and he is the best dad. But I had to take a step back because I am a control freak.
Which is hard.
So I was raised by a control freak, and I am less so. The only thing that I would do when I would leave my husband is like, please just remember to feed them. Because he would be like, oh, they're playing outside, I'm going to work on my car, and then time would get away from him, and he'd be like, oh, well, I forgot to eat lunch. I'm like, but did you feed the children? So yeah, so it wasn't so much like, oh, you need to feed them X, Y, and Z. I'm like, just feed them. Yeah, I don't care what the hell you feed them. Feed them dog food for all I care. Just feed their children. So,
but I actually very similar to Cyndi. Like when he would have to stay with them. So there came a point where his shift changed, and where he was actually staying home with them during the day while I was at work, and then when I came home, he left and went to work. And that's how we ended up saving a little bit of money on daycare for a little while. And I would like write out literally a menu, a program of like, okay, they'll wake up at this time. you'll have to feed them at this time, and this is what you'll have to feed them, and then you'll wait 2
Wow.
hours, and then you'll do this, and you'll
See,
do that.
I didn't
And
do
I
that.
drove myself crazy.
I'll
be
seen
at
it,
work.
and it
I
drives
will-
them crazy
Yes,
too.
I would be at work, and I'll be
Nobody's
like,
happy.
"Did you feed the child?" And he was like, "Well, you know." I was like, and then finally, a coworker of mine was like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, what the hell? Like, you do know the child is not gonna die, right? Like, it's not gonna die."
But also,
And
acting
if
like
it
that
dies,
you're
you'll bring it back
treating
to life.
him like
Yes.
a child.
Like a babysitter.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. And so then later on, then I start complaining. I'm not gonna speak for anybody else. I start complaining about how does he not know that he's a parent and not a babysitter?
And you're like, maybe I better look in the mirror
I
and how I'm
know.
treating him. Yeah, no, like I said, I mean, I give my mom the credit for that because I am a control freak, and she gave me really excellent advice on that one, and it panned out. Thanks, Mom.
And I was actually fortunate enough to have a father that was very, like, he was, in some instances, because he had to, was actually more involved in taking care of us than my mom was, because my mom made more money, and she was in a hospital system, and so those hours are ridiculous, right? So then it became the responsibility of my dad to wake us up, cook us breakfast, take us to school, do our hair, help us eat. Like, he became he was not a stay-at-home dad, but he became, you know,
The
both
primary caregiver.
the primary caregiver for a while, because that was just the dynamic of our household.
Which is how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like
Whoever is supposed to be, right? It
Yeah.
does not have to be like, oh, it
whoever
falls
has
under-
the time and
Exactly.
the flexibility.
Everyone
and
should be capable.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. So, what are some things that you feel like you did well? Like you were like, oh my gosh, I actually got this right.
You want to go? You want me to go?
You
You're
can-
still thinking?
She's like, oh my god. What am I?
So, I think one of the things we got right is focusing on experiences with the kids. It occurred. It started when I remember very specifically. Tabitha was 8, Zach was 6, and I looked at Eric and I said, "We have 10 summers left until Tabitha leaves for college. We need to take full advantage of these 10 years. Like, you think of 10 years as a really long time, but if you think of the fact that you do probably, well, for us financially, we did 1 vacation a year. I'm like, I want these to be experiences that they look back on and remember for life. And so that's what we did. We would have 1 big family vacation every summer, and we all looked forward to it. We'd let the kids we'd talk about where we were going to go, right? We'd play. I'm not going to say they made decisions, but they had some input. And it was a blast. And we would, I don't want to say we saved money, but we knew we were going to spend money on that vacation. So we didn't go full out. We weren't staying in 5-star resorts, but it's like, I want to do this, so we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Like the first one we did, we actually drove, and we went up to Canada. We had family in Pennsylvania, so we drove to Pennsylvania. We visited some family. Then we drove up and we spent like a week going through parts of Ontario, and then came back by and stayed with family again, and then came home. I had just started working at this point, so I was still part-time. We didn't, like I said, when I started working, it was to fix up the house and go on vacation. Like, that's what I want. Eric made enough for us to live. I was trying to make money for us to have fun and improve, right? And it was great. But one of the things we did, so I grew up elementary years in Ontario, and I remembered going to the Science Center all the time on field trips, and I remembered a trip my dad took me. It was he and I, we went for lunch one day to the CN Tower, and I wanted to take my kids to both these places because they were cool to me, and they were part of my childhood. And visiting the CN Tower, not even eating there, visiting it and going all the way up was ridiculously expensive.
Really?
And like, this would have been 16 years ago. We're talking over $100 a ticket. What? And I was like, no, I don't care.
It's cheaper to go to Universal Studios.
Okay. But the point was, I wanted to do this.
You had that memory.
We were there. I
and
wanted to do this. We
yeah.
were going to pay to go up to the highest point. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. But we still laugh about how scared Zach was on the glass floor of the CN Tower.
Oh gosh.
And Tabitha, and you know, we have videos of them, of Tabitha dancing out there, and Zach like walking along the metal pieces that connected together, because he was terrified of heights and it freaked him out. But we're still laughing about that.
But that's a memory that is
which is my point.
Exactly.
So that's what we would save some money. We're like, okay, but we're going to spend money to make memories.
Yes.
We're not going to spend money on the designer clothes and the fancy cars and the bigger house and the every electronic toy or whatever. We're going to spend money on experiences and memories.
I love it.
And that's honestly still how I live today. Vacations are more important to me than cars.
I love it. Betsy?
I feel like I'm still parenting and I'm still trying to get it right, so I don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Always.
So,
We are all.
I picked one thing I got right. You want a list of things I did wrong?
I wanted them exposed to. So I grew up in the military. We moved every 3 years, lived in different parts of the country. We lived in Germany. And in the military, it's a class system, so it's based on your rank. But because of that, your neighbor could be a mixed couple, they could be Hispanic, they could be, you don't know. And because of that, it's not a problem for the most part. So I wanted my children to have as close to that as possible. Not the moving around part, but the living with people of different cultures and races and ethnicities and just all of that. So for the first, until Monty was going into 8th grade and Marin going into 7th grade, we lived in Ackworth. Their elementary school and middle school were both Title I schools. So we had middle class, lower middle class. We had people of different, like some of my kids' friends, their parents literally came from Africa. Like some of the kids were born in Africa, and we had different people of different cultures. And then right before they went into 7th and 8th grade, my husband had been making the commute to and from Alpharetta every day the entire time. And some days he would also have to hit perimeter to visit customers. So we're like, you know what, we're going to move over closer there. So we moved to Fulton County. Chose the wrong school district, but that's hindsight's 2020. We ended up living in Johns Creek. And Johns Creek is an incredibly wealthy area. One of the neighborhoods that feeds into their school, Usher has a house, Jeff Foxworthy has a house, Tom Glavin's son used to play lacrosse with my son. So you had these people that's very affluent, but you also had apartment complexes because their school had a 40% Asian population. Whereas when we were in Ackworth, it was 0.05. In Ackworth, it was 51% African American, and then right below that was white, and then we had a small Hispanic, and then tiny. So when we lived over there, we had a much larger Asian population. My kids knew people who were from Israel. They knew, but they also, because they had started in middle class and lower middle class, they saw what that looked like. So when they saw this extreme wealth, they weren't in the bubble. They knew what it was like outside that bubble, whereas some of those kids had no clue. No clue what real life was like. And because of that, I feel like my kids have a different worldview, and I'm proud of that. Because I feel like my worldview has made me more accepting, more, I don't know how quite to say it, and that's what I wanted for my kids. I didn't want my kids to be like, okay, this is all I've ever known, and therefore this must be right and true. Because there's a big world out there, and there's so many things that, so that's one thing I know that we did right.
Okay. I like it.
There's so many things we did wrong.
But
we could do like 5 podcasts on the things that
we did wrong.
But you know, guilt runs strong in mothers.
yes.
So, as you know, the podcast focuses on purpose and inspiring and motivating mothers, women, that are going through this journey of purpose, wherever you are on that journey, whether you know what it is, whether you don't, whether you're trying to figure it out, wherever you are on that journey, I feel like you can find something here in the podcast. For you ladies, do you feel like you do know what that purpose is for you?
So I think purpose changes as you go through different stages of life.
I love it.
So, and I said earlier that I always saw myself as being a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was my purpose,
Mhm.
was to give my children that base,
Mm-hmm.
to be there for them, to read to them, to sing with them, to take them where they wanted to go to the playground, to make them feel like they were important and the most important, and they always had a loving home and parents to take care of them. Like that was my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to work and I became a larger financial contributor to the house. And then I got to show them the purpose of being outside of the home and being a contributor to the family financially, being a contributor to something else, being able to take my skills and use them outside of the home to benefit a company, to benefit employees that are working with me, to benefit my employer, to whatever. And to show that, this is what I can do, these are my skills, this is how I can use them. And I can use them to show you what you're capable of doing, whatever you want to do and accomplish. And it can be at home, and that's something to be proud of. It can be out of the home, and that's something to be proud of. It can be some combination of the two. And it was also to show them that there's not gender roles. And I think, and now part of this, my husband is fantastic. When I stayed at home,
Shout out to Eric.
I
Okay,
think that
sorry.
happened last time I was on the podcast.
I know. I do.
No wonder he likes listening to your podcast.
Exactly. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate
But
it.
so when I stayed at home, I felt it was my responsibility to manage the house, and I still think that way. I mean, not when the kids were infants and I was barely functioning, but after that, like, there's no reason why I couldn't get the shopping done and have a dinner plan, even if it was fish sticks, and keep the house reasonably clean by I would clean something every day. Like that's how I did it. So, but then when I went back to work, Eric would help. It wasn't like, well, you're only part-time. It's still, because I was part-time, but the other part-time, I was full-time parenting.
Exactly.
And he would help. And then as my kids grew up and I went back full-time and my job became more stressful, and he was able to take on more. And we've just split all of the roles dependent on who was better suited for them at that point in time. So it's not, I didn't raise my son to think that he can't.
You're the man, and this is what you.
He can't do the laundry and cook dinner.
Right.
And my daughter doesn't think, even though I hate taking out the trash, and I do it maybe 1% of the time, I'm capable of taking out the trash, right? I'm capable of taking my car to get the oil changed. I'm capable of doing yard work. Just because, do we still split things up? Yeah, we split things up because there's things he hates doing and there's things I hate doing. But we're both capable of doing any of it. And my kids know that. And I think that's important. So I think my purpose, at least from a parenting and spouse perspective, changed throughout the last 25 years, dependent on where we're at.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what my purpose is now. It's to continue to help launch my children,
Okay.
to always be there to support my spouse. But I think there's probably something outside of that I'm still searching for.
Okay.
Now that I'm needed less than I used to be needed.
Okay. And we talked about that a little bit because you had some ideas that you were playing around with or considering.
Yeah, I don't want to get into those right now.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there's
I
that.
haven't done any of them. I have reasons for that, but that's
You'll always have a reason for it, Cyndi.
I will.
So you know I'm going to get on you, and then we'll leave it alone. But
I
I'm not
don't
going to do it
want
right
to
now.
do it right now.
We're not going to do it right now.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Your turn. How diverse
She's like,
attention.
deflect.
What's your purpose, Betsy?
Okay, well, the last time we were here, we discussed that I don't believe in purpose. That I believe, I'm not religious. I don't think that you're put on earth to do something. But, and you chastise me for that, but that's just who I am. So, but I do think that like, when I finally got comfortable being a stay-at-home mom, I wanted to be the Kool-Aid house. And what that means is that's the house where everybody comes to.
Yeah.
And part of that's because my mother was, after I moved out of the house, my brother still lived there. I used to say that she was the keeper of lost children. Because he and I both had friends that, like, especially my brother, they had friends that were kind of like thrown away kids. Where his parents, like, it's like, oh, it's 18, you turned 18 today, you need to move out. Like that kind of thrown away kids. And my mom would bring them in and take care of them and make them feel loved. So I wanted to do that. And Monty didn't have friends that needed that, but Marin did. So I wanted to be there for that. I wanted these kids to feel that I accepted them for who they were. And it was a little bit when they were young, but as they got older and things got more complicated, I did feel like that was important for me to do. My daughter had friends that identified as the opposite sex and presented themselves that way, and their parents refused to accept it. She had several friends that were bi and gay and all, and I was like, okay, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Here, let me just feed you instead.
Yeah.
But then we encountered some difficulties as Monty got older. And something, I guess this is the closest thing I can feel in regards to having a purpose. And I feel like this is something you already know about me, but I feel the more you talk about difficult things, the less shame there is, and shame is what kills you. So my son had an issue, he had really bad anxiety and got into some drugs, and they were really popular there, and they were just marijuana, but it overtook his life. And for like the first year, I was frozen with shame. And then I found people to talk to. And then the more I talked about it, and the more open I am about it, I'm like, okay, well, his anxiety is nobody's fault. That's a biological thing.
I mean, technically it's yours and your husband's.
Well, it's mine. If we're talking about whose fault it is, but I did not create the genes.
It's genetic, that's my point.
It's a genetic thing. It's a biological. Him having anxiety is no more his fault than when I had breast cancer.
Exactly.
I'm just messing with you.
I know.
I have mental,
So, but
you're
so
right
I just
about the
found
shame, though.
the more I talked about it with people going through similar things, I saw shame in their eyes too until we started talking about it. So now, like at work, I talk about cancer, mental health, parenting, and now recently I'm on the whole menopause thing.
And she blogs about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like the more you talk about the difficult things, the less difficult they become. And what makes them difficult is because you think you're alone.
Exactly.
And when you no longer think you're alone, somebody is able to help you lighten the load.
I think it also makes them difficult when you think you're going to be judged because of it.
Absolutely.
Because, and I was joking about the anxiety. I have OCD. That's what my first podcast with Harli was about. And I hid it for years and years and years because I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want someone to judge me for needing medication to help me when, that's what I needed to be normal. And
so when we moved to the wealthier part of town, most of their friends are on medication and go see a psychologist, so there is no shame there at all, which makes it much easier to talk about. However, when moms found out that Monty had been caught smoking pot, granted, he had been smoking pot with their kids, he was disinvited from things. He was kind of set aside. It was like, no, you can't hang with my kids anymore. Like, really? Who do you think got my son starting smoking pot? Oh yeah, it was your kid. But I never had those conversations because I didn't want to embarrass him, and I was embarrassed. I was filled with shame at that point. Once I got over the shame thing, I'm like, fuck you.
So this podcast will be explicit.
You knew that when you invited me here.
I did. There's no judgment here.
It seemed like judgment to me.
I don't care.
Hi. No.
That's why you're sitting in the middle. You're trying to instigate.
Oh my God.
Doing well. No. Anyway, but so Betsy, tell me your definition of purpose. What do you think your purpose means to you?
When I hear somebody say purpose, my knee-jerk reaction is they're thinking religion. They're
Right.
thinking, what did God put me on this planet for? But because I don't have a religious belief, I don't know, I'm just as agnostic, because I am agnostic, I'm just as agnostic with the idea of purpose. I'm not sure that I believe that we have purpose, but I don't know how. See, that's another thing.
What's to jump in?
Well, so because I don't see purpose as religious, and as I said, I'm not sure what exactly. Like I feel like at this stage, there's probably more that to me. I see purpose is a way to benefit others. Like for a while, and I still feel this way, but I don't know that I'm doing anything towards purpose. I feel like because I've experienced OCD and I understand working through it and I understand the stigma that goes with it, I do feel some purpose in discussing it in any way that I can help release that stigma or benefit somebody else who might be going through it, right? But so to me, purpose is just how can I benefit my family, my community, the world. That's more purpose to me than
I think it's
religious.
a matter of semantics then, because in my mind, the moment I hear, what is your purpose, I think God-given purpose or God, whatever, I always think that, but I think that I do have,
But you're
So
I
So I think
am
if a
benefiting
person-
others, but because of,
I think if a person is religious, then they do associate one with the other. But I don't think that one
You
has
have
to
to
be
be
associated
religious
with the other.
to have a purpose. And I feel like through what you are doing, you have, me knowing you for a while, you have the unique ability to do exactly what you just said. To take a stigma out of something, anything, whether it be mental health, whether it be menopause, whether it be drugs, whether it be home situation, challenges, whatever it is, you have the unique ability to take that stigma out of it and normalize it and make someone feel like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not the end of the world after all. I mean, oh crap, somebody else can, week after week at our 9 to 5, you put out a blog and it never fails that somebody will reply to that and say, oh my gosh, Betsy. And so that is a purpose. And it does not have, I think because some of it is, and
don't you mess up my message.
too late. So I think you may be looking at it, and I don't want to make assumptions, but you may be looking at it because you know what the other person is as far as maybe spirituality, religion, or whatever. So you may be looking at it from that lens, but just like Cyndi said, you don't have to be religious to have purpose. And you are tied to having that unique skill set, that unique ability to destigmatize whatever subject that you feel like latching onto at the moment. And
Did
that
you make me cry
benefits-
last time too?
Probably. So, and that impacts and serves others.
So maybe when I'm doing these things, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. I feel like this is not my work job, but just this is my job to do this. But talking about it, I discount myself.
You don't give yourself credit for
You don't
what you're
give yourself
doing and the
credit for
impact you're
exactly.
having.
And I don't want to give myself too much.
Because then you feel like you're taking away from
Yeah.
Or you're
But you're
doing
not-
it for yourself instead of the
No.
person. No?
And Harli and I talk honestly about race. Because our company has a lot of, like, one of the reasons why I'm very open about mental health is because I know in different communities you don't go and seek help that way. But I don't want to portray myself, I don't want to be the white savior. I don't want to be the one, I have to come in and I have to solve everyone's problems. And I think that's it, is I want to tread lightly.
But we know that that's not what you're doing, though.
But not everybody does.
Not everybody does.
If you know
but
me, you
even-
know that I am very conscious with that.
You are. But my thing is, no matter how or who you are walking in your purpose, somebody's going to get offended. Somebody's not going to take it for what is intended to be taken. Somebody's not. But the thing with purpose is, you don't let that stop you. At the end of the day, you're going to be that Betsy who's going to destigmatize something. You're going to be that person who goes to the Pride Parade and gives hugs to anybody that walks by that wants to be hugged. You're going to be that person who's going to be a beacon for, oh, you feel like you don't fit in? That's okay. You're going to be that person. Exactly. So you're going to be that purpose. So you cannot possibly tell me, and we've known each other long enough to know that we're not trying to offend each other, and if we do, we'll talk about it offline and we'll get over it. But I don't for 1 minute believe that you don't believe in purpose, because that is your purpose.
So it's just a matter of semantics with me.
Exactly. Wow. Anyway.
It's clean.
Thank you. And I don't buy a waterproof mascara because it's a pain in the ass to take off.
It
So.
flakes too.
And I also don't buy cheap mascara because I'm a grown-ass woman.
Anyway, so my work
Thank
here
you.
is done. No, I'm just playing. But I thank you for, Betsy. What you've always done is you've always been open, and you've always been like, this is me. So whatever, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing and putting things out there, because somebody listening to this is like, I did feel shame because of this.
It's not easy to be the person that puts himself out there. It's not easy to try and be the person that removes the stigma from topics that people don't want to talk about, because it always makes somebody uncomfortable. And a lot of times, for whoever it is that thinks that there's something wrong with mental illness, with being and having anxiety, with admitting you go to therapy, that being gay is just as normal as not. There's always somebody that takes offense to that, and then they attack the person who's saying it. So you're putting yourself out there by doing that, and kudos to you.
Thank you. It's much easier to do it in writing when you're not saying it face to face. I can say all sorts of names whenever I write.
But your name's still on it. You're not doing it anonymously. You might feel hidden.
Because I'm not talking face to face to you, and this is how I've always been. And if it's a really controversial thing, I'm like, I'm not sure how this is going to go over. Would you read this, please? I have done that.
Yeah. No.
But thank you.
But I think that's amazing. Yeah, so guess what?
You done?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I know. This is crazy. But, oh my goodness, you ladies have so much wisdom and experience from what you have been through, for the way you chose to not make any excuses for how you wanted to build your family structure, your family dynamic. And this is how I'm going to raise my kids, and I'm not going to apologize about it. And I think that is absolutely amazing. And so thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective, your reason for, listen, I don't have it all figured out, but this is what I did, and I think that's amazing, because there are so many people out there. We're all trying to still figure it out in some shape, way, or form, right? And so, like Betsy said, when you put it out there and you take the shame out of it, and you're able to talk about it and have that experience and that relatability, that's really what purpose is really all about. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So, to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm actually going to put Betsy and Cyndi's information on blast, so make sure to look for it in the show notes. You want to reach out to them and say, you know what?
Just don't come to my house.
I really appreciate you sharing your story or being vulnerable. Let them know, because I'm sure they will appreciate it. And as you know, we are nearing the 1-year anniversary of the pod. Mind-blowing that this is actually happening. I'm just thinking about a year ago and where this thing was and where it is now. So I really want to thank everybody for just hanging in there with us, with me, and coming on this journey with me. That is the greatest gift. And then when I get you all if you guys reach out and you mention a certain episode or the impact that it has had, then I do know that I am walking in my purpose. So I really appreciate that. Stay tuned because I am in cahoots and I am planning something for the 1 year anniversary, and I want to make sure that you guys don't miss it. So please stay tuned. Hit us up on Instagram and Facebook, Inside the Bubble HG. Drop a heart emoji. Let us know how you loved the episode because I know you did. These two amazing ladies. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the pod. All right? And you know what I always say, there's purpose in your story.
I hope you enjoyed our show today. Hit the subscribe button and share. Share this pod with your family, with your friends, with your girlfriends. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Inside the Bubble with HG. Keep the conversation going. Drop us a heart emoji. Engage with us. We would love to hear from you. New episodes are dropping every Monday on your podcast streaming platforms. And remember, there's purpose in your story.